So welcome again, everybody. My name is Wannes Rosiers. I will be your guide today. I will discuss as well with Kinda and Maarry, but Kinda is our prime star. I myself am head of customer success at Conveyor. Conveyor is a data product development which can quite easily develop data products. That's also a bit the goal of today, talking about data products, but mostly a bit more abstract, more from a visual point of view, talking about the impact of product thinking on data and on data governance in particular. Because today we're very proud to have Kinda and Maarry on our webinar. And I've spoken Kinda before a few times, but last year at Big Data London, I had the opportunity to watch her live on stage at the Data Machine Learning meetup. And at least I got really impressed by both the way Kinda shares knowledge as the knowledge she has to share. So high pressure on you, Kinda. At that moment, you were transitioning from Hellofresh to Prima, focusing on data governance. I think you can present yourself way better than I do. So welcome, Kinda. And what do you do? How does the life of a director of data governance and business intelligence look like?
Hello, Wannes. Thank you for the very kind introduction. Also, hello from my side to everyone watching live and possibly catching up later on. To start off a little bit about myself, I've been in data for over a decade now, and I've been focusing along the entire data value chain. If we focus on the past 5 years, and I think that is the relevant part for the discussion today, I've been part of 2 major data transformations, and the transformation have been going from the centralized bottleneck towards a more decentralized approach, aka data mesh, and bringing product thinking to data. Both of these transformations, I've been focusing on establishing a federated data governance from the ground up. The first transformation was at Hellofresh. That was a little bit tricky because that was right after Jamak shared the blog, and we just jumped on that train. And that means federated data governance was missing. It was not one of the 4 pillars. And that meant the transformation started, and I had to get the buy-in to kick that off. Obviously, Jamak didn't add that pillar because she thought, of course, you need data management in place, and you don't need to explicitly add that. And then later on, it was added. Right now at Prima, I'm leading the data governance and business intelligence functions, and I'm focusing on, again, establishing federated data governance in support of the data transformation. I'm also looking into double downing on the data culture, which, as you know, is extremely important for the transformation, building up a data literacy program to make sure that as we push new things, we go ahead in time and make sure that we're bridging any literacy skills within the domain, so we empower them in the transformation. That's on the governance and literacy side. On the business intelligence side, we're looking at how to standardize and govern the metric layer and how to look at that semantic layer and kind of bring some organization governance in place.
Yeah. Thanks, Kinda. I think it's quite interesting how you say that Jamak in our original blog post considered federated governance as a given. And I think to continue a bit on that, if you see the 3 other pillars, they're addressing a key point data mesh is trying to address. And then the federational governance is mostly addressing the issue that has been introduced by federating stuff. I'm quite certain we'll get there later. I have just some slides, nothing useful there, but it should stick us to a bit of a process which we've defined for ourselves. So also you at home, you can follow a bit where are we, what are we discussing right now. So let's start here, Kinda. When I did reach out to you to participate on the webinar on the impact of product thinking, you immediately said yes. And probably as I sneak in some of your favorite topics. Data governance has been changing throughout the years. The adoption of product thinking, once again, the change of data governance, it will have triggered something with you. But so let's start with the pre-product thinking era. How would you describe the state of data governance a few years ago? What was it all about?
It was not a good state. I mean, you have to be honest. Everyone knows that it's kind of the elephant in the room. And whenever I'm presenting or talking with an audience who has been either within the governance function but on the recipient side, everyone laughs, right? It is the truth. And I would say we're still not over that hill. So there's still a lot of improvements to be done. And if you just look at some of the recent studies, they're still pointing into some of the hurdles that we have. So I think in 2022, Gartner had a report in the hype cycle data management report, and they noted that 18% of the organizations are not there yet when it comes to the governance infrastructure that is needed to kick off data mesh. And a more recent one this year from KPMG mentioned that around 60% of the organization that kicks off a data governance initiative, they never get past the pilot. And that's more than 50%. And that's a really bad number and a very strong indicator that something is not working in the right way.
Yeah, that indeed shows that it's very challenging. Maybe people don't even really know what to govern. That might be part of the issue. But then also from an implementation point of view, there are some main challenges. Do you have a view on what's most difficult to manage?
I have a very strong view, and that could probably also take a whole webinar. But I think the major challenge, which I'm also seeing a lot of people within that space already addressing it, is the huge gap that is very apparent. So when you look at a governance team and how it operates, it's almost very methodical and systematic. They come in with a plan and a roadmap, and it's very disconnected from the business. So the question of what is the business trying to do? What are they trying to achieve strategically this year? What are their use cases, right? And the result often is very clear that you have a glaring disconnect. And that means whatever you're doing on the governance, all of these foundational things that we want to push for, no matter how well executed they are, they remain irrelevant. And you never want to be irrelevant. As soon as you're irrelevant and you're sitting on that board of directors and talking about things that do not connect with the other executives, they're just gonna, raise their shoulder and say, so what? So coming in and saying, for example, we're getting a data catalog, we need to improve the data discoverability and the data lineage. The CFO is gonna sit there and just raise his eyebrows at you, like, and what does that mean to me, right? So you need to change the perspective. And it's not about changing the actual work that we need to do. It's just about packaging it differently. So start looking into what is the business trying to do? And then look into, okay, what are the data challenges there? Resolve those. And if there's any foundational things that you need to add, you can sneak them in. So for instance, if the company is looking at improving customer acquisition, look at, okay, these are the data that I need to track around customer. These are the interoperability things that I need to resolve. Oh, I need to improve discoverability so people can find the data. So you put that in the roadmap, in the action points, right? And once you start communicating that, and that is another main challenge, the way we're telling the story is extremely boring and it doesn't play in our favor, whether that is the story to get the buy-in or telling the story about your success. So if you're going and saying, I've documented and I've assigned ownership for X number of data products, what does that mean? What is the value? Tell me the value and the impact of these data products. Tell me how much operational efficiency have you cutting down? So for instance, X amount of time, it takes X amount of time less now for the people to find the data, which actually leaves room for them to do things that are driving insights, right? BI, ML, AI, all of those things that, the senior organization here, and they just lighten up. So this is what we need to work on, tying things up to the business and communicating using the right terminology that actually conveys the value.
Yeah, I hear you talking. I believe I hear you say twice, kind of a start with why. Start with why with use cases, as in this is what we're going to do. This is what business wants to achieve with data. On the other hand, also start with why on your data governance initiatives, so that you explain what is it that we really try to achieve with the data cataloging solution. But it's mostly this first start with why, and then you were talking about value and impact. Has this been the trigger to bring product thinking to data, or is there more to it?
Mm. It's probably a better question to ask Jamak, since she was the one that brought it center and front. I think it's more than that. I think, yes, a lot of the things that product thinking is bringing is helpful because it really doubles down on accountability and ownership and pushing all the good things that product thinking brings with it. But I think it is there to, beyond effectively managing the data, it is there to transform the data into that dream. So before data mesh, everyone was talking about data as an asset. And we never reached that. And that is because teams are just producing data and they're throwing it over the fence. There is no design process coming into place in terms of how is the data being used, how is it providing value, and more importantly, how do I design that data in a way that it can actually enable the other teams to derive the needed value from it. So I think that's a facet. That's probably one of the triggers. And if you listen to Jamak, she talks a lot about data not having agency, that data is not protected. And by introducing product thinking to data, you have this new unit, which is a data product. And a data product, the idea is for it to encapsulate all the access controls, the policies, the standards, everything that you need to protect the data. And that should be the only way for you to actually access the data. So I think it is much more than just managing the data effectively. I think it brings with it a lot more, and probably the triggers were accordingly as well more.
Yeah, you were describing what you consider as a data product. It's a bit everything, and now we're going way too fast to slides. So it's kind of everything you need to work with data. It's data and the access and some descriptions. It's really a unit combined to move forward. On the other hand, we have been talking about product thinking for data. Do you consider them the same? They're slightly different. And as you were giving a definition for data products, is that the definition, or is there any, and do we need it? Because at least my feeling, if depending on the vendor you're listening to, as the term is still quite early, probably you might end up with other definitions. So I think there's still some uncertainty for a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's quite understandable as well, right? It's very confusing. As soon as you open up the internet and you start looking for what a data product is, you find so many definitions. And I think there are too many definitions because there are too many diluted versions of a data product in reality and how it's being implemented. And I'm attributing that to the difficulties that we've been having in building these data products, because we are not there yet when it comes to the infrastructure in building a data platform that is really a two-click thing that is very easy and streamlined. But also the organizational readiness, that is quite tricky to understand. Okay, are we there yet? Are the people within the domains have the right skill set and have the right mentality to embrace that new responsibility that's coming in? So it is quite complicated. I think that is the reason why we're seeing what I said, the diluted version. So Jamak has that defined. What I've seen in practice is I'm not running around trying to get a definition for data product for it to be a universal thing. But I think what is very important is, as you, in your organization, you need to address that confusion and you need to say, we are here defining data product as such. And yes, there are so many definitions out there. This is what we're capable of creating right now, and this is what it means to us. And that is the most important thing. I would say, let's avoid being bogged down by the theory. Let's focus on what it means to us in practice and how we can actually deliver a data product within our organization. What I've seen and what is actually working for me right now, there is a school of thought, and it is pushed by Nadim von Heidebrand von Mindfuel, Alexander Borik from Zalando. They are looking at it in a divide and conquer way. And so they're looking at data-driven products and they're categorizing them. So they have data products, metric products, analytics, ML, AI products. And I found that in practice to be quite helpful because the definition of a data product could be too broad and too confusing for people starting that transformation at the beginning. Also, from a governance perspective, it allows me much more flexibility in defining the roles and responsibilities assigned to different types of products. So to give an example, a metric product would be, it is about the metric, the formula, the dashboard, the underlying data, the materialized view perhaps that you've generated for that. And all of that together is a product. And it should be managed as a single unit. And the person in charge of that product is probably a business analyst or a data analyst, right? So from a governance perspective, it has been much easier for me to categorize those products accordingly. And my experience has been quite positive so far.
Yep. There's two things which I really want to highlight in everything you were saying. The first is the pragmatism, as in this is what we consider a data product right now. And I think the right now is also really relevant because it allows you to maybe even mature over time, not dogmatize this is what it is and will always be, but we can grow towards something. And then for me, it's the first time, so thanks a lot. It's the division into this is a metrics, this is a metric product, this is data product, this is an ML product, because what you at other places quite often see is you somehow need to make something clear, and then we call it a source aligned product, something intermediate, and then an end user product. By you really put better names on it, as in this is what it's intended for. Already setting a bit of a purpose of a product, linking back to this start with why. Maybe also bringing us a bit back towards data governance. We stated this product thinking might impact data governance as well. What's the impact that you see? And maybe it's already been told. It's a bit this introduction of the fourth pillar, the federated governance. Is that the most crucial impact?
So if we look at it from a wider perspective, data mesh and what it means to data governance, obviously from a positive side of things, it scales data governance because you're pushing the responsibility to the left and it almost acts as an extended arm. And you have the people who are exactly in the right position, having the contextual knowledge, are the ones who are able to say, we actually need a customized standard here, or for this domain, we need to have some particular policy developed for us. And that's on the positive side of things. Obviously, it makes things more complicated in terms of, okay, how much do I centralize versus decentralize? And that is a huge topic on its own. It's not going to be the same across the different domains, depends on the maturity. So there is this layer of complexity that comes with the federation. If you go down and start looking at the product thinking itself, I think the big change that we're seeing is as we're introducing product thinking, it's actually improving and doubling down on the ownership and accountability of the people and the experts in the domain, which gives us space in the governance to actually do what we do best, which is focusing on creating these standards and templates and streamlined processes. And a big focus on how do we actually enable people to take on that responsibility and empower them. So I think there is a shift in focus, and it's definitely in the right direction. And that is also the reason why I'm hopeful that governance start getting a better reputation as we move forward and we start moving away from this isolated ivory tower perspective where governance is creating these standards and policies completely isolated from what is happening on the ground and the differences between the domains and the use cases that they have.
Yep. And maybe because you were talking about the shift left as well, it's placing responsibility somewhere else. It has this federation, but definitely linked towards data mesh and federated teams. the technical capabilities might differ with what we previously had in a central data engineering team kind of owning data. We're now doubling down on ownership, placing it in business teams, yet those people have different technical skills. Does that have an impact? And you already said a bit, it's about enabling them, but this might change the requirements for the toolings you use probably.
It's an excellent point, because, and Tom Redman has been talking about it for a while now. Most people that deal with data, they're not the ones that have data in their title, actually. And so as we move forward, what that impacts us in is things that we need to do, right? So I think an extremely strong data culture is imperative. We need that, because only when the people understand and embrace the need for them to take this ownership and this responsibility, that's when things start moving in the right direction. It is about skills. It is about the enablement aspect, whether it's from the tooling, how are you going to use that? Whether it's from automating the processes that the people needs to use, whether it's about training them on whatever standard that is coming or whatever new responsibility that they're getting. So all of that. And ultimately, if you look at the framework itself, the governance framework, it has to be a scalable framework. It has to allow for that flexibility. And I think, again, we touched upon it a little bit. It is about understanding that things are going to be different around the domains. And that is a good thing, because you want to allow that leeway that enables the domain to start being autonomous and have that room for innovation, which means understanding that not all standards are going to be standards across the board, but you need to see, okay, what works for a particular domain versus what can we do to customize it for another domain, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and then maybe one of the key tools in data governance, or at least the one that we've seen being introduced over the last few years, and if you've already mentioned, is data catalog. It's all about data discoverability. Does this product thinking also impacts that category of tools? There's a lot changing now, where we're going towards a different granular level, where data catalog was focusing on just the fields and descriptions, and now you're packaging stuff in products. You've talked about processes needing to being enabled. Does that fit to a data catalog that sits somewhere else? So there's a lot of things changing. How do you see that?
If you look 5-6 years ago and compare the vendors and kind of the capabilities and features, you're definitely seeing a change there. And it's very nice that they are keeping up and trying to see, okay, where's the market going? What are people trying to achieve? And let's pivot accordingly. And so we're definitely seeing more automatic metadata capturing, so that the people sitting in domain, it becomes easier for them to capture that information also in real time. We're seeing, and this is something that I extremely like, usage analytics and usage metrics, which tells you something about, okay, how is the data product being used? What is the satisfaction of the domains and the use cases that are actually leveraging that data product? I think we're also seeing a stronger focus on the business metadata. Typically, most of the data catalogs had a very strong focus on technical metadata, and I think that business context is extremely important. Seeing that that is actually the starting point of designing a data product, you need to understand why and how it is being used, and what are the business use cases that this data product is going to unlock and support. So the business lineage is also something that I'm seeing. I would say, in general, you have these features, easier user interface, but I think that mindset, that data as a product mindset, is also visible. So in some catalogs, you're seeing now as well data domains being treated as product teams with responsibility when it comes to ownership, SLAs, data quality metrics. And you're also seeing a lot of the vendors making integrations with data quality tools, data governance, and data privacy tools. So I'm happy to see that the ecosystem is kind of slowly coming together, so that we get this all in one place, because at the end we need to reach a stage where It is very easy to develop a data product and maintain it. Until we reach that, it's a big overhead on the people sitting in the domains.
Yeah, no, that makes definitely sense, and certainly the last thing resonates. We need to have a central overview what exists and an easy way to develop and a one place, because if you look to the modern data platform, for example, the amount of technologies in there is huge. I'm sorry I dragged through a very long introduction to really get this common understanding of data governance, data products, the challenges we've solved and we still see before you. Because when I reached out to you to participate in the webinar, you immediately said yes, but pushed me in a direction. This is what I love talking about. Before I'll explain to everyone at home, this is where questions can start. So if you have some questions at home as well, pop them into the chat and I'll try to get them in. But what you said, Kinda, is how about we focus on prioritizing the right use cases? It's this start with why. And so let's go there. I believe this why is really important. I already emphasized it as well, but it's way harder. Many organizations are struggling with this. And how do you tackle this first phase? How are you selecting first use cases and then prioritize your roadmap along the way?
It's extremely difficult, like you said, but it's extremely important to highlight this topic. It takes us back to the beginning when we were talking about some of the main challenges of data governance and why it fails, because it's disconnected from these use cases. And that is the reason we need to start from there. And you mentioned it a couple of times, the why. And the why of a business is what drives us to grow, or what cuts resources and cuts costs, right? So this is ultimately what drives any business model. And so you need to align with that. So as a data leader, it is your responsibility to understand the business. You cannot be trying to manage the data more efficiently without understanding the actual business of the company and what they're trying to do, because your job at the end is to support them in their goals. And this is what you need to do. You need to sit down and understand, what are your short goal terms? What are you focusing on this year? What is the long-term goals? And capture these use cases. And a tricky thing with the use cases is, obviously, when you start speaking with people, sometimes the use case comes with already a solution. And this is usually not the use cases that are the why ones. You want things like, I mentioned at the beginning, improving customer acquisition, for instance. We want to optimize the supply chain. So this is a real goal, right? And you can start then delving, understanding, okay, what is the data that is needed for that? And then taking another level, understanding what are the challenges there, and so on and so forth. In general, I categorize the use cases into two buckets. There are the strategic ones, like the two examples that I gave. Either these will drop on your lap, and that happens with the very critical ones. So we're launching a product next quarter. We need to fix the underlying infrastructure because it's not scalable. It's not robust. We need to do something about it. This happens when something is critical, or very good scenario. You've done a good job. You've established your reputation in a company. They know you can get things done and you can support them with that. That's a really good place to be at. Or as you're speaking with the different leads of domains in a senior organization, you understand that. The second bucket is operational excellence. So this is where you're looking at optimizing the resources you have, cutting costs, and all of these use cases fall under that bucket. When it comes to the prioritization in general, but I'll talk as well about those first use cases because you also mentioned that once. You can do one of two things, and it's always going to be a hybrid. So usually prioritize, obviously, you look at how important that is. What is the impact? What is the complexity? Am I ready to actually take that? Because you need to do a bit of exploration, understand, size it in a general way, because you don't want to go down that rabbit hole, obviously. If you start doing that, you lose. If you take 6 months to do all of that exploration, you're gone before you've actually set foot in it. So it has to be something quick. The second thing is being more political about it. And that means aligning yourself with a particular department or domain. And this always depends on the politics in the company as well. So it might be that it's an entity that is not the headquarters, but you know you need them and you need their support. And once they're on, it's going to snowball. This is something typical sometimes. I personally always try and make sure the CFO is on our side. This is where the money comes from. If they trust you and they see that you can do a change, it's much easier to ask for a bigger budget the next round. So this is kind of two ways that you can go about at it, and it's usually a hybrid.
Yep. Trying to summarize what you were saying, it's like first move in use case definition from kind of a feature driven definition. This is what we're going to do. Sometimes probably coming from a technology point of view, there's new technology and this would enable us to build product A, so we should need to more towards an objective driven roadmap. This is what we want to aim for, and therefore this or this solution might work. So it's turning around from feature to observation. Then you were talking about selecting the right use case with impact and value, probably low effort as well for the first, trying to find a good thing. But then if imagine you've selected this first use case, and definitely when it's an objective driven use case, not a feature driven one, you need to start designing your solution. This is way different than in pure product development or digital product development, where then feature definitions are where are we going to place a certain button and how does a user flow work. Data works differently. So how do you design a data product?
You need to have a data value chain view of it. So you look at the use case and then you try and understand, okay, what are the main data that I need to actually support and unlock that use case? And you try and understand where's that data coming from. And this is the tricky part, because the data value chain, as it flows from the operational data up to the use case, that is a jungle, and that could be extremely complicated. And you definitely don't want to lose yourself along all of the transformation that are happening, because all of these transformation, they're probably not going to be documented, and it's going to be a mess. So you need to keep a very high level overview. It's almost, again, I think Tom Redman mentioned this, focus on where the data is created and where it's finally used. And then in time, you can fill in the gaps. And if you start bottom up and start building the data products that are powering the data at the bottom, the impact will trickle upwards, and you can work yourself up from bottom until you reach that use case at the top. Important thing that you want to do is along the way, as you're building these nodes in the value chain, is try and not overfit the data product on this particular use case. And that is a bit of the beauty of bringing product thinking into play and understanding that you want to make sure that the product that you're pushing out is actually bringing value not to only one customer or use case, but to multiple customers. So how do I actually balance that? And this is where, the DPMs shine, I would say.
Yeah. Just to state, Emeka, I've read your question in the chat. I don't see a lot now to fit it in, but we'll definitely ask in at the end. But I'll go a bit on this thought, the reusability of a data product, because that's a bit what you're addressing right now. You have purely fit for purpose, and then I try to solve one thing, but you acknowledge the fact that a data product can be an element just in a chain full of data products, even multiplying the value of your data product. Personally, in my latest presentations, I always use the example of salt, where you extract salt from the sea. It's kind of the asset in which we considered data as well previously. There's salt coming out, and that's our asset, but you need to do something with it. So you package it as a product, you sell it, and that's then being used to create a new recipe and then something, well, nicer and tastier. But it's a hard thing to balance. You've already addressed that a bit. How do you get people so far that they're willing to take this balance? Because a fit-for-purpose product you're building for your own purpose. The reusability you're trying to sneak in is, well, most likely for reuse outside of your domain. So there's a difference in where your motivation is coming from. So this must make it hard, no?
I would actually argue against in the opposite direction. So what I tell my DPMs is, you want to make your life as easy as possible. And if you are within a domain and you're managing that data products, you need to have a manageable data product portfolio. So this is what I call it, a portfolio of data products. The more you overfit a data product, putting aside that this is not correct to duplicate data, and we all know about that, but if you're talking to a data product manager, the more you overfit, the more you're going to need to reiterate on that data product. And possibly, if you're not following the right standards, you're duplicating and making other data products, which is, again, not the right thing to do. But this is kind of my entryway in discussing that. And I usually have kind of two guidelines to help them navigate that. First stop is a bottom-up approach. First, you need to understand, and you already have that knowledge, what is being produced by your data, what is the high level, what is the top data that you're producing. Always think about interconnected data. Don't think about an isolated table, think about data sets, how data in general that you produce are being used together. And then start looking from a top-down approach, what are the main use cases that you know about? And start connecting the dots. And you will see with a high probability that a lot of these use cases are requiring a same subset of the data. And then try and see how you can generalize the data product that you're building so that it actually fits those use cases. Having said that, obviously you're not going to be covering all the use cases, and that is not the exercise to sit for a very long time and try and figure out all the use cases that are out there. That is not sustainable. There's always going to be new use cases that are coming in. You just want to make sure that you do and design the data product to the best of your knowledge right now, because things are going to change, and that is a fact of life. And the data products are going to go through different iterations and different versions. And that is also fine, and that is what is to be expected.
Yeah, you were mentioning your data product. You must see it as a part of a bigger whole. It needs to be able to be used in combination with others. So you're moving towards interoperability. Still, this can be a hard challenge. No, I've been working at a media company, to give a personal example, where we had a newspaper magazines where a user is a physical person and a subscription is hence one person having a single subscription. On the other hand, we had a streaming service where a subscription is a family, because just like on Netflix or Disney streaming, you can push people to create user profiles. So the granular level is different. Just to give an example, it's a hard, at least I found, to make sure that people build data products to describe both, which are interoperable, which you can link to get the same granular level in there. How do you get your DPMs there?
It's a question that a lot of people are grappling with, because it's not an easy one, like you mentioned, right? And I think the best way to go at it is not try and figure it out all beforehand, but you need to go at it in thin slices. And if you go at it use case based and with the mindset already embedded with the data product managers, that actually the first data product you're building will be at a certain maturity level. And there is a journey that we need to go through, because the transformation is not going to happen overnight. The data platform is not going to be created and developed overnight. The governance standards are not all already rolled out. So we're building and we're going on this journey. And as you build that first data product, it's going to mature. And hopefully at some point we reach a level where the maturity level is there. And even then, there is the life cycle, the typical product life cycle of managing that data product until the point in time where it's deprecated. And that is how I kind of get them on, by explaining that whole journey, that we're all on it together. And when it comes down to the interoperability, when it comes into play, and if you have a use case, hopefully that is general enough and you can actually see the dependencies, and you've established also the communication channels between the different domains, because that is actually some of the things that the governance team can start focusing on, which is enhancing the collaboration. That is the point in time where you see people starting talking and saying, by the way, we actually need to talk about this and we need to have some consistency there, interoperability there. Let's sit together and do this. So all of these dependency mapping then comes into play, and you can start then tackling that. But don't expect to be able to solve it all at once for everything. That's impossible.
Hey, you're talking about starting small, adding thin slices. Quite recently, I sat down together with Jean-Georges Perrin, who said the advantage of data products and product thinking for data is that you have the right to be wrong. Where previously you had a central data team and they're building a data assets, and well, probably they're kind of a bottleneck, so they deliver once and then iterations go slow. Here you have the advantage of product thinking with rapid iterations. Is that a huge advantage you recognize as well?
I think yes. Again, no one knows how to go about doing it correctly, and it's about going on that journey together, and things are not going to be smooth and things are not going to be right from the first time, and we need to improve it. It's the first time as well we're applying product thinking to data. So that is to be expected. What I think is extremely important is to communicate that. So previously when we were talking about how do you define a data product, usually what I always also say is there is actually this data maturity lifecycle, and we're going to go through it, and we're not going to get things correct from the first time, and we should not even attempt that, to get everything correct at the same time. We go at it, like you said, in thin slices, and I think it is helpful because it's a huge thing and an ultimate goal that we're trying to reach. And Rome wasn't built overnight. You need to build on that foundation, and at some point we're going to get there.
Yeah. And then in the end, I still see one other design challenge. Maybe you might see more, so feel free to add them. But one of the hardest things I see is people always want to have just one more field added to their, let's say, first report, and that can be a data product earlier in the chain. That field does not necessarily belong to the same domain where your data product lives. So how do you cope with this? When do you just add a field? Are you allowed to just pragmatically add a field? And where's the limit in this design challenge?
From the governance side, what I try and do is provide decision guidelines, frameworks. Obviously, that does not cover everything. And you will have always use cases where particular domains come and say, exactly, the example that you gave, right? How do we deal with that? Pros and cons. On the one hand, it's actually very good that it gives us the flexibility to take the right decision. On the other hand, at the beginning, when people are still not very much into their role, they get a bit apprehensive. Am I doing the right thing if I bring in this field, or is this the wrong thing to do? And so that goes into our role on the governance side to do a lot of hand-holding at the beginning and support them. Yes, there is some guidelines, but as you go on making those decisions, we're there to support you with. So some guidelines could be, if it is only one field that is coming in, and most of the use cases this data product is supporting always combine that field, maybe from a usability perspective, it brings more value to your customers if you add that field. Granted that the ownership of that field is with another domain. It's up to you as a data product manager, understanding the portfolio that you have to manage, if you want to take on that responsibility or not. If the field is only requested by one use case, then it makes sense for that overhead or transformation to be actually taken by that particular customer that is requesting that. So there's always if, then, and at the end, it's always about looking at what am I as a product manager willing to commit to and what not. Some cases are going to be easier and you can have a guideline that is very clear, and others are gray. And we have a lot of gray areas. But again, I think that is kind of the beauty of giving that flexibility to the domains and making the right decisions based on what they're seeing and the data product that they have and how it's being used. But it's difficult at the beginning, and that's why I'm always encouraging, as you go through that transformation, be there for the teams and support them, and do not just give them a framework or a guideline and then let them do with it what they want. Offer your assistants, have a regular cadence with them, listen to them, what are their use cases, hear what they're thinking about, give recommendations, and so on.
I think this is a very strong message, as in just not only give a framework, but acknowledge the fact that there's probably gray zones in your framework where you need to guide people. And in the beginning, this can be hand-holding, and later on, you can give people a bit more freedom. We're coming to the final question I did prepare. So again, warm welcome to the audience to post some questions in the chat. And Emeka said I will bring your question up later. One more thing I wanted to ask, we've now discussed how do I select a use case, how do I design this use case, this data product, it needs to fulfill a certain purpose. But then you come into the fact that you need to start actually building your use case and doing this. And this again, with a federated approach, has new challenges compared to a central data team previously. It's making sure that your data product team has access to the right data, to the right infrastructure, right part of the platform, can see the definitions that is being used, that you have maybe a process in place where you define the boundaries of your product, saying this hand-holding what can be in it, what not. So I'm assuming this product thinking and certainly the federated approach to building data products has an impact on these processes as well. How do you govern them, and what do you see as the most crucial changes?
It's a perfect question because it kind of ties up to a lot of points that we've been mentioning today. We talked about that left shift. We are shifting the responsibility to the left, which also puts us as a governance team at a position of enablement. So it is about empowering and streamlining the processes there, right? So you want to have a streamlined development. That means you want to have clear documentation and guidance and training so that the people in domain can actually leverage the data platform that is new to them. How can they use that? The new standards and quality metrics and controls, possibly data contracts that are coming their way. You want to enhance the collaboration communication, another point that we touched upon, right? Foster that. It's extremely important because what we want to move away from is the central team where all the standards, all the knowledge is disseminating from. And you want to actually empower the people in domains to start being those hubs of knowledge as well, and to actually share what works for them, what doesn't work for them, what kind of particular use cases do they have. Maybe some other domain has some kind of similarity, and then they can share what works for them and what doesn't. So you want to enhance that. You want to promote data democratization. So obviously, you want to make people's life as easy as possible. So we talked about the training and the guidance and streamlining the processes, but it's also about making their life easier in the sense of getting quick access to the data, making it very easy and quick to develop data products. Obviously, if we're talking about data products with sensitive data, business sensitive data, you need to have the right access mechanisms into place, but you want to make sure that whatever policies or access mechanism you have into place is there to facilitate the process and not hinder it. And if there is some things that you need to go along the way, then they have to be streamlined and automated and be very quickly. You don't want to have someone trying to build a data product and having to jump through one loop after the other. And it takes them a long time to actually put this into production. That you want to avoid at all costs. So I would say it is really about essentially enabling the innovation by having a robust governance framework that allows you that space. So we want to be able to develop data products in a controlled but a flexible environment. And this is where we want to be at.
Yeah, I was planning to do a summary, but I think you summarized already most of things in your answer now. So thanks, Kinda. But I think very briefly said, there were challenges in data governance. We're trying to address them with product thinking and enabling reuse of data. But to do so, you need to understand why you are doing something with data, what you're building. And you talked about a framework on prioritizing them. When selected, the design is probably one of the hardest elements. There's major challenges, and one of the questions in the chat goes around design. So I'll first ask that one. But when you designed, then the build phase comes, and you acknowledge the fact that there's a federated way where you actually need to enable it. Enabled governance, and on the other hand, if you talk about building, it's an enabled platform, and those are moving towards each other, towards a governance by design platform, I'm assuming. But so one step back, you were talking about design. Christophe in the chat is asking, in our organization, we tend to forget about data modeling for your data product. So it's not purely to design what's in it, but also which data model are you going to use for a data product, thinking about dimensional models, referential integrity, snowflaking, and so on. Is this still relevant, or what do you see as the place still for, or the value still for data modeling?
We're actually doing this right now with one domain, and we're looking how it goes. So I talked about this hybrid approach where you go bottom up and top down, and you have a view of the data that you have and the use cases. But I think we need to take a step back and leverage those things. And absolutely correctly, we don't talk enough about data modeling, and you need a very good data model in place, because that also supports with the interoperability and with the consistency that you need. And this is one of the things that we're doing right now with one of the pilot domains, so to say. And we're trying things out to see what works best based on the knowledge as well of the people that you have in the domain. So you want to make sure whatever modeling that you choose, make sure that either you have the expertise in the team to show the team how to do that, you transfer that knowledge, or try and leverage what they already know as well. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I think if you look to the three major pillars of a product, it needs to be desirable. So someone needs to be willing to use your product. Hence, your data model should support the needs of the user. On the other hand, it needs to be feasible and viable. So you need to be able to make sure that you can craft the product. And that's what you're mentioning, reuse the existing knowledge of people to build a certain data model. Question from Emeka. First, compliments well deserved. It's excellent and insightful. Emeka has been trying to stand up a data governance and data management practice to support the organizational agenda of exploiting value from data at scale. Yet there's some friction, even though Emeka is being accused of trying to start up a full department. We're actually proposed to start with minimal resources, minimal skill sets, start small, slicing. So how can you communicate this properly? And I think it's a very valid question. Data governance seems a huge program, and often we're communicating the end goal. So how do you communicate as well?
Thank you for the question. What I can tell you is you're not alone. And I think most of the governance functions start up like that. It's going to be very rare that you get called in and there's a huge budget for the team. And so you definitely need to build up a use case, probably an MVP, and show value. And what has worked best for me in the past is to take the angle of data quality. It's something everyone can understand, and it's something that you can also put a number on. And it could be as easy as sending out, looking at a particular data, trying to understand how often that data is being used. So you can send even a survey telling people, how often do you use that data? How often do you actually need to resolve the issues with that data? And start getting all of these numbers around the usage and the challenges with it. And you can then put a number on these hours, take the average salary, the hours, and it will add up. and it's a big number. And you could actually look at the reports that are published by McKinsey, Gardner, and you will see, because they do also these reporting, it's going to be also similar sum. This is actually how I got the first buy-in for the data governance. I had that analysis done on the data that was being used by the analytics department, and it turned heads. And then it was, as a one person, do something with the marketing team. And that was the first MVP. But again, I took the data quality angle to it. Obviously, now we're in the data management and space. And that is easy to show. And it was an MVP. There was not a lot of engineering capabilities that were assigned to me, but we could put some data contracts in place, manual, nothing automated on paper. But even that, we saw an improvement in data quality, which we could actually turn into value and put a dollar sign on it. And that's how it kicked off. So this is just an example, going at it through data quality, but there are other ways as well. You could also start looking into the BI layer that you have and putting some governance there. And the reason why I sometimes go to the BI layer, because it's very close to the exco. It's very close to the senior organization. They're looking at the dashboards, right? And if you can show that, you know what, it's not governed, you have a lot of bad practices there, and we can actually improve that. And also there you can put a lot of numbers and show that if you put management also on the data, on that BI layer, it brings you a lot of value, whether it's getting consistent numbers, consistent metric, optimizing the space underneath. So these are two areas that I usually recommend people to take, because it's quite understandable and it's an easier sell.
Yeah. I think it's quite similar answer to what you're going to give on the final question we give in the chat from. How do you quantify the business impact? Is because, well, data governance and data product management initiatives, they can seem a cost project. So how do you communicate value and the money that it will save and earn to C-level? It's kind of the same answer, no? It's the impact you're having.
Yes, but it is trickier than that, for sure. And the reason for that is you're not the only team that is unlocking a particular use case. It's going to be a lot of other teams working on that. So I think this is the point in time where, as you kick off the work on a particular use case, yes, we know that, for instance, the marketing team is going to be working on that, the data governance team, the data platform team, everyone has a piece of the pie. And that is fine. And it is a team effort. And so at the end, it is about bringing visibility to all the different teams. And I think that is the struggle, is that sometimes the CDO comes and puts a number and say, we actually managed to do that. And then you get a lot of hands up. It was not only data. That is actually misleading. So I think, yes, you can put a number, but be very transparent that it's a teamwork. And that is what the data world is becoming. It is a team sport. It's not only about the governance team or the data quality team or the BI team or the data platform team. Everyone needs to collaborate together, and everyone needs to be running in the same direction.
I think with the message, this is a team sport, a federated team of data engineers and data workers governed by some central entities, all having the same goal, is the perfect summary of today, leaving us with a full hour of very insightful talks by you, Kinda. I put the bar really high in the beginning. Interesting way of talking, sharing knowledge, and interesting knowledge to share. And I think you really up to the expectations. So thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you, Wannes, for the invitation. It was an absolute pleasure catching up with you again. Also, thank you for everyone who also took the time today and for your also very interesting questions.
Yep. Thanks a lot indeed for everyone at home or at work. As the question was already posed and answered in the chat, but doing it once more, the recording will be made available afterwards. So we'll come back to you with the recording if you want to rewatch or send it out. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.
Have a great day.